What's going on, guys? Vulkan here, and today we are covering my first impressions of V Rising. So big shout out to Stunlock Studios for allowing me to play the game a few days early to form some first impressions as to what this game is and how much I enjoyed it. Now, I did want to mention that I will have a full review, like a much more in-depth review, once the game's been out a little bit longer. I didn't feel right reviewing a game when I couldn't put more hours into it. Also, before I dive too far into this one, I did want to straighten some things out when it comes to V Rising. So I've seen a lot of comments about this game being an MMO. V Rising is not an MMO. It's definitely a online survival action RPG. There are no massively multiplayer elements to this game at all. If anything, it's just a co-op game that happens to have like 36 other players running around in it as well. Definitely shared world. So please don't go into this thinking it's going to be like Lost Ark or Albion Online. It has some similarities to those games, but it shouldn't be put in the same category. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's break down V Rising and my experience with it so far. So when you first start the game, you need to create your very own vampire using their character creator that comes with the game. It's very simple, it's to the point, and it gets the job done. Once you create your vampire, you are thrust into the tutorial graveyard where you learn how to fight, gather materials, and craft rudimentary tools. Now, this here is a very small taste as to what you're going to be doing for the majority of the game. Now, once you're done with the short tutorial, you're thrown out into the Farbane Woods and left to fend for yourself with very little direction. Some people will really like this, some people will definitely hate it. Now, for me, I love this aspect. The open exploration and the kind of like go anywhere attitude is what I look for in open world games. So for me, V Rising definitely delivered in this regard. And I loved the fact that I could just go wherever I wanted to go. There wasn't invisible walls or boundaries or areas where it was like, hey, you can't go here because, you know, blah, 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 you haven't done this yet. I could run wherever I wanted to run in the entire world. And for some people, they're going to like that. So to get started, I had to build a castle. And this is where the review kind of truly begins, like the first impressions. So I want to talk a little bit about building your castle, since this is a cornerstone feature that they've talked about quite a bit. So in V Rising, each player has to create their own castle, which is basically an estate, and this can be as large or as small as you want it to be. You can add gardens, throne rooms, prison cells, everything in between. Now, for me, I am a very simple guy who enjoys simple things. So give me like a huge room with all my crafting stations, all of my storage containers, and I'm sold. Like a loft apartment is exactly what I need. But if you're someone who really likes housing and those type of systems, V Rising might be able to scratch that itch for you. So the game gives you everything you need to build the bare bones castle with. So they give you the walls, the flooring, they give you the roof, and all of that fun stuff. But after that, it's up to you to go out and discover new recipes, blueprints, and unlock all kinds of new visuals to help make the home of your dreams. So what I'm trying to say is there's some effort that you need to put in order to make what you need or find a certain item or a decoration that you're looking for. Now, beyond that, you will also need the correct materials in order to craft that certain thing. Now, this is where the grind rears its ugly head. So V Rising is heavily focused on crafting and resource gathering. You need to harvest tons and tons and tons of materials in order to make progress. And just like in any other survival or crafting focused game, you need to gather stone and then refine it into stone bricks, for instance, right? So for instance, you need like 20 stones to make one brick, and then each wall takes 10 bricks. So it easily sends you into the thousands for just walls. Now, I don't want this to come across as like a huge time investment or something like overly grindy, or I didn't want to do it, or it was like, it was like pulling teeth. It wasn't like that at all. But I also don't want to downplay how much time you will be spending on hitting stones with your hammer or cutting down trees with your axe. Like, this is a thing. So I just, I would spend a few nights just gathering resources so I could make my base upgrades. And this applies to all aspects of the game, whether it's harvesting lumber, stones, animal skin, bones, vegetation. You're going to be required to harvest, craft, and upgrade in order to unlock better and better stuff and make progress. So if you're somebody who is just looking for a 100% combat focused game, this one probably isn't for you. If you don't mind going out and doing some grinding and crafting and gathering and all of that fun stuff, then V Rising you'll enjoy it. It'll be something that I think you'll enjoy. But for me, I mean, I enjoy the whole mining thing, right? I didn't mine all of that. There were a few times where I thought to myself, my Lord, this is a ton of materials just to get my walls built up. So anyway, do with that information as you will. There's going to be crafting, there's going to be resource gathering, and it's going to be intensive. But I did want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the other half of V Rising, and that's the combat. And I want to talk about everything that combat entails. So this being a game from Stunlock Studios and them having created Battlerite, you can definitely expect one thing: strong MOBA-like combat. And that's exactly what you're going to get with V Rising. Most of your skills are skill shots, so you need to aim and land those spells or skills in order to actually deal the damage. You have counters that you can parry and give yourself buffs. If you time them right, then they can save your life. You have shields, you have leech, and so on. They're all very MOBA-like skills. And this game definitely feels like it was built on the Battlerite engine. So if you're someone who really enjoyed that game and its combat, you should feel right at home with V Rising. If you're somebody who really likes Path of Exile, Diablo, Lost Ark, and you want a bunch of skills to use and spells and things like that, this is probably not going to scratch that itch for you. And it might be something that seems a little too simplistic. And we'll get into that here in a second. So I want to break down combat and talk about its two forms, right? Talk about how this whole thing works. So you have weapons and you have spells. Now, the game features 4 weapons: the sword, axe, hammer, and spear. And all of these double as your harvesting tools. So you're going to be using the same weapons a lot. And I mean a lot. Whether you're attacking something with a sword or you're cutting down vegetation with your sword. Same thing goes for your axe. Now, once you reach the copper tier of weapons, you'll also gain weapon skills. So for your information, it goes from bone to reinforced bone to copper to iron, so on and so forth. And once you reach copper, you get your first weapon skill. And these give you another skill to use in combat, which adds another layer onto combat. Up until this point, it's really just basic attacks and your one spell that you have. So as an example of what a weapon skill is, for axes, this could be Blood Frenzy, which causes damage and gives you a temporary attack speed buff. For spears, you can use a flurry of thrusts. For hammers, it's a wind-up smash. And for swords, it's a whirlwind. And from my experience, guys, weapons are definitely your filler damage. These are used to whittle down enemies while your spells are on cooldown. Now, I understand where the developers are going with this concept, right? They want spells to be like your nukes and your weapons to be something that you could spam. But in my experience, the weapons still felt pretty weak, and they really failed to drive home some big damage or generate any sort of excitement when I used them. Instead, I would just sit there and spam them and then eagerly wait for my spells or my skills to come off cooldown so I could get back into the fight and be engaged with what I'm actually fighting. And this is where I really noticed the game felt like a MOBA. Damage going out was incredibly low, and enemies had quite a bit of health to work through. Unless you were fighting minions, then your basic attacks worked really well. Otherwise, your basic attacks felt incredibly hollow. Now, this damage can be amped up, right? You can go and you can equip a new tier of weapons. Going from bone to copper to iron is going to help out your damage immensely. But compared to spells, they were designed, I think, to fall a little bit short. So that's it for weapons, but now I want to talk about spells. Now, spells are the crown jewel of V Rising combat. These feel great to use, the feedback is awesome, and you can tell just how powerful they are even from the start, which is great. It's a great feeling. So when you first begin V Rising, you're going to have some blood spells at your disposal. But as you go out and you defeat bosses and you progress through the game, you're going to unlock more spells across a variety of different types. You have things like frost spells, which could be like a frost hawk that's going out and freezing enemies. You have chaos bolts that are going to burn your targets with purple fire. You have unholy, which can be used to summon vile beasts and deal decay damage. You have illusions, which can summon like illusionary kind of creatures and things like that. And these are where I really had the most fun. I could experiment with different combinations. You can equip 2 spells at once, so you can kind of pair them up. But this was really fun, and it was something that I really liked. Seeing how they perform together, right? Does combining an illusion spell with a frost spell, does that give me something that I really, enjoy, or can I build around this? Some worked really well together, others not so much. But honestly, these would just work really well. And they would nuke minions, or they would take huge chunks of health off a boss if you were able to actually land your skill shots. It felt very satisfying to use. So ultimately, combat in V Rising, guys, is the tale of two types. You have weapon combat, which feels and looks fun, right? It feels good, it looks good, but the damage and the spammy nature just didn't hit the button sometimes. You know, it didn't deliver what I thought it would. Then on the other hand, you have spells, which are these really cool and well-designed abilities that both feel great to use and have damage that matches it. And I'm hoping that we see some improvements to the weapon side of things to help smooth out the peaks and valleys of combat. Because right now it feels like nuke abilities, right? Use your spells, your skills, and that just feels awesome to use. And then you're just kind of in the doldrums of combat. You're just using your filler attack. You're doing filler damage. And then, oh, okay, it came off cooldown again. Now I can use my spell or my skill. Okay, now I'm back into the doldrums. And it's not great, right? So that's kind of my overall impression of those two pieces. But that's not the only thing that influences your combat. So you also have something called a blood type. And these are really cool. This kind of plays into the vampire thing for V Rising. So when you fight enemies, they're going to have a blood type. Something like rogue, creature, brute, etc. And when you get their health down low enough, you'll be able to feed on them. And when you feed on them, it allows you to suck their blood, instantly kill them, right? So it's an execution move. But if you feed, you're going to be able to change your blood type to theirs. And you're going to be able to gain certain buffs that can be used in combat. So for instance, a rogue gives you increased critical chance, or a chance to expose armor, which increases the damage that that target takes. And depending on what quality of blood that you feed on, going from 0 to 100%, you're going to unlock more or less buffs. And this is a really, really neat system. It gives even like the weakest of minions a chance to have perfect blood quality, right? And gives you a reason to actually go out and fight them. Think of all the different games that you're in, and you see like this little kind of like level 1, just nonsensical creature sitting there, and you just run right past them because why would you waste your time on them? In V Rising, you could have that same situation where you have these incredibly just bottom of the barrel enemies that are just so weak and insignificant, but you're running by and you're like, whoa, he has 100% rogue blood, and I absolutely thrive off of that. So I need to go fight him, take care of business, feed on him, get that blood. That way I can go and tackle some harder bosses. So this is a whole system I really like, and I think that this kind of rounds out combat a little bit more. Now, before we move on, I did have one last thing I want to talk about, and that's the 4 weapons. Okay, so this was a huge issue for me, right? You have the spear, the axe, the hammer, and the sword. And of all of the issues that I had with V Rising, it wasn't a lot, right? But my very, very short list of things that I didn't like about the game, this was the largest one on there. In a game like this, where you're spending the majority of your time either harvesting or fighting bosses, only having 4 weapons to use the entire time just feels so limited. I was very disappointed. I mean, I understand the game isn't Diablo. You're not going to have fountains of loot. You're going to have 100 different weapon types to choose from. But even having 10 makes a huge difference. I mean, I would love to see daggers, scythes, offhands, tomes. Like, there are so many things they could pull from when it comes to vampire lore. So hopefully we'll see some new types added before release, because right now I think people are going to be very disappointed in this limited set, and they're going to get very bored very quickly of seeing the exact same weapon like types, the exact same weapon skills, and the usage of those exact same weapons, because you're not only using them for combat, you're also using them for harvesting. So you're constantly using the same stuff over and over again. So moving on, I did want to talk about the world of V Rising. Vardaran, which is the world, is just huge. I mean, this is a massive world they managed to create, and I love it. The entry zone of Fairbane Woods is huge and somewhat varied. They have bandit camps and strongholds kind of scattered about. You have packs of wolves and treants and stone golems kind of patrolling the roads. But the thing I love most is how alive it feels. Stunlock did a great job creating a sense of immersion and liveliness in the game. You have enemies that walk the roads. You have merchants walking roads that you can ambush. You have bosses that'll sometimes just show up and they'll give you like the battle of your life. You know, you're out kind of farming copper ore or something, and suddenly a boss shows up and you're like, whoa, what are you doing here? And you duke it out. And all of these things seem random and offer something to help break up the monotony. And what I mean by that is that once you establish your castle, you're going to be following the same roads and paths to go gather resources, to farm points of interest, or to go complete a goal. So running that same road and passing those same camps over and over again is going to get boring. So by having things like this, having a little sense of randomness is going to help keep you more engaged and somewhat help keep you more on your toes, because you don't know when Tristan the vampire hunter is going to show up and he's a skull and he just wipes you out super quick. You need to be able to either get away from him or, hey, maybe you'll put up a fight, maybe you'll end up killing him, who knows. But overall, I really like this, and I hope to see it kind of perpetuated throughout the entire experience. So during my time, I was able to clear Farbane Woods and work my way into Dunley Farms. And these are fairly similar areas. They're a little bit different. Both feature lots of green foliage and kind of like winding paths through the countryside. But a key difference is that there are more humans and towns in Dunley than there is in Farbane. And I really hope that kind of Silverlight and Hollowed Mountain are pretty different to help give us a little bit of a break from the farms and forests. But overall, I could definitely tell when I entered a new area. So it wasn't like, oh, am I in Dunley or am I in Farbane? I know where I am. So they did a great job kind of communicating that, but it's sort of like a gradient. You go from forests and kind of like wildlife and overgrowth into more green, but more of a farmland with a little bit of settlements. And then eventually, hopefully into Silverlight, which is like a civilization metropolis, not a lot of overgrowth, not a lot of really anything. It's just towns, you know, and things like that. So we'll see, but for now, that's kind of my experience. So that's it for the world. But before we wrap this thing up, I want to talk about one of my favorite things. This is probably one of the slam dunk things in V-Rising, something I absolutely loved. And that's the V-Blood units, spells, and unlocks. And I know you're thinking, Vulkan, we already talked about spells. You're right. So I'm kind of bulking these up with unlocks. But I wanted to keep this section separate from combat because they do overlap, but there's so much more to these elements than just making your vampire stronger. So early on in the game, you're going to unlock something called the Blood Altar. And this is something you can place in your castle that helps you track down elite enemies, and you can defeat these enemies to unlock new skills, spells, and crafting workstations. And because V-Rising doesn't have a leveling system, this is kind of your progression. You're going to use these as milestones to work towards and then really kind of gauge how powerful you are or where you are in the game. And I got to say, these bosses are no joke. So at first, they really aren't a challenge, right? But once you get a few under your belt, they suddenly take a dramatic increase in difficulty, starting with the Bandit King. So prior to this boss, I was able to solo most of these folks. Like, it wasn't a big deal, you know, maybe die once or twice there. But for the most part, it was simple. But then I got to the Bandit King. This one required me to grab some other players. I was like, hey, SOS, I need some help. And I got a party together and we went out. We even, as a group, we wiped 3 or 4 times before we were actually able to down him. And for me, these were an absolute blast to do. I loved these. They felt challenging enough that I wasn't bored, but they still felt doable, even if I had a lower gear score than what was required for the actual boss itself. So it was something that just, it felt good, right? It was a good balance of challenge, and I think a lot of people are really going to enjoy it. It's not something that you can walk in and just push over, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like, you know, a Soulsborne or a Souls-like game where you feel like you're just throwing bodies at the boss and trying to kind of like learn the different intricacies of their attacks. More of this is just, you know, planning and figuring out what you need to do and being able to execute. So it felt way more doable, which I really liked. So I mentioned something in there called gear score, and I want to touch on this really quick before I continue. So gear score in V-Rising works just like any other game. It's the average of all of your items that you have equipped, and as you put on new tiers of gear and weapons, you're going to increase that gear score, which will then allow you to take on harder and harder bosses. So that's really how it works. It's not exactly overly crazy. As your gear score goes up, your health, your damage, all of those things will scale up as well because they're stats on the actual gear pieces themselves. I'm going to do a deeper dive video into kind of like the gearing system of V-Rising, but for now, that's really all you need to know to kind of understand this. So as you go through and you kill these bosses, you're going to consume their blood. And when you do that, it's going to give you new spells, and these are permanent unlocks. But that's not the only thing you get, right? You get a spell, that's great, but most of the time you're also going to unlock new crafting workstations, new recipes, or even new baseline vampire skills like new shape-shifting forms, or the ability to pick out different blood types and see what blood type an enemy has before you go and encounter them. All of those things are packed into these V-Blood units that you have to go and track down. So all in all, I really enjoyed this gameplay loop. I don't know what it is about it. It was just super fun to kind of pick out my next like target and go on an assassination attempt, right? And go out there and see if I can duke it out and beat them and unlock something brand new. And it's part of the mystery too, because you don't know what you're going to get. You know a little bit like, oh, hey, I need to go tackle this person in order to get this crafting workstation, but I don't know the skill I'm going to get. And so it's always like, opening up a mystery box. You kill the boss, you feed on their blood or whatever, and you unlock the crafting workstation, but then what else did I get? What's the skill that I got? How can I use it? How can I build around it? So it's just one of those things that I really, really enjoyed. So overall, guys, I mean, that's my first impression of V-Rising. I really enjoyed the game, and there are some things that I feel need to be improved on or expanded upon. I mean, the weapon system, the gameplay loop itself might be a little rocky towards higher levels. I'm not sure, but I think the game itself has awesome potential. And I do plan on doing a more in-depth review once I've been able to sink a lot more time into the game. But for now, it's just one of those that I'm really looking forward to getting back into playing. And I'm already going through and kind of forming a game plan on what I need to tackle next, what bosses I want to go and take care of first, what recipes I want to chase after. So to me, if I can think about a game outside of the actual world and it kind of continues to pull me back in, that's a good game. And that's something that I'm really looking forward to playing. And I'm really looking forward to hear everything that you guys have to say about it as well. So again, thank you so much for watching. This has been Vulkan, and I will talk to you guys next time.
Sound off, one and all, everybody.